Call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Blunier.
Here.
Leach.
Here.
Lehman.
Yes.
Mennel.
Here.
Newman.
Here.
Parrott.
Here.
We have a quorum.
I asked you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are no public hearings tonight, nor are there presentation special reports. There obviously will not be any public comment tonight. So the consent agenda is the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting October 7th, 2019, and the closed session of October 7th, 2019, and the approval of the bills.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any comments? Call the roll.
Blunier.
Yes.
Leach.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Mennel.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Parrott.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Village President has nothing tonight. Village Clerk.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Village Administrator.
I have one item tonight, Your Honor. There's a memo in the packet regarding the building improvement grant recommendations from the Business District Commission. The commission met in October, and they recommend 2 grants for approval. One, the first of which is Bob Grimm Chevrolet at 2271 South Main. Their total project cost is $1,994,769. So they get the maximum grant, of course, of $10,000, and they're putting on additions on both ends of their building. And then the second grant is Hambrick Commercial Properties at 117 West Jefferson. Total project cost of $33,320. Approval grant amount of $10,000, and they're going to be replacing windows on the second story and possibly replace the front entry door. The second applicant, Hambrick Commercial Properties, was approved with a recommendation from the Business District as an exception to the grant rules. Steve, do you want to discuss that, or do you want me to?
Well, I'd say I'd make a motion to approve the Bob Grimm Chevrolet grant for $10,000.
Second.
Any other comments?
Is that the west side of South Main or east side? Which facility?
It's
The one on the left is your
East-
going.
east.
The east side.
Side.
I don't do west.
And they
east
have,
very well.
they had several projects or several parts that they're doing. This part hadn't been done yet.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, call the roll.
Leach.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Mennel.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Parrott.
Yes.
Blunier.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, and the other one, I'd make a motion to approve Hambrick Commercial Properties for $10,000, but after the second, we can have discussion.
Second.
Discussion.
On this one, you need to understand that this piece of property was about 2.5 years ago, if I remember what was said at the meeting. They had done tuck pointing on the building, and because of that, they had received a grant. And we have in the application process, the very first question says initial eligibility. Question number 1 says, has the same type of grant been approved for this property in the past 5 years? And if they mark yes, then it's supposed to be voted down or not recommended. So what you see, the Business District Commission has a dilemma because it's a new owner. The building has been sold now to Hambrick Commercial Properties, and they feel that it should be worth the opportunity. But the question that you have is why do we have that question at all if the recommendation is going to be go ahead and do it anyway? You have to stop and think, was the building made more valuable to the previous property owner because of the tuck pointing? And if that is the case, then you would understand that under the current rule, that we have is that if you sell a piece of property within 5 years of having a project done, we get back, we prorate it 20% less each year. So we should be getting about 60% back from the property owner, which then we could easily say we could either give to the new property owner or make it 100%. But when it was done 2.5 years or so ago, the property owner got theirs approved under the old rule, which there was no depreciation or rebate coming back. So now you have this dilemma that again the Business Commission has to look at and make a decision. But in reality, based on the old rule, it should be no. But on the current rule, if we get the money back, then we wouldn't be out quite as much if we gave them 100%. So if you think about it, if it was, say, 2 years ago or so, we should get 60% back because there'd be 3 years left, to prorate. So out of that $10,000, we should get $6,000 back, or if they only got 5, we should get 60% back or whatever. But we changed the rule, and now we would require people to pay us back. So if that's the case, do we want to give 100% of this? But I'm telling you that because in the future, you could have a piece of property that is sold. Somebody could buy a building, ask for improvements, get a grant, and then flip it. You need to understand what the opportunity is. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but if we flip it, we need to make sure that we get back our prorated share. So then going along with that, I'm not sure if we created a process to tell our village attorney we need to start filing liens against these pieces of property, I'm going to guess. Or is their signing this document sufficient?
Yeah, and probably a conversation that needs to happen. Maybe Julie and I, after meeting or otherwise, can converse. I know when we updated the grant program, I prepared kind of the self-canceling mortgage for use in this, and I don't believe we've recorded one yet. So I think that is implementation of that would be appropriate and something we should proceed forward with, and we can work out logistically how we're going to share information, make sure those get done.
Okay, so the reason why I say that is we need to make sure we get the money back, okay, if they sell it. The question, though, is what happens if it's not sold, that somebody comes in within 2 years, 3 years, and wants to come up with another plan to improve their property? We're saying if you sell it, it's okay for the new buyer to do it, but you, because you still own the building, you don't get to do it. I'm just asking because that's going to be the dilemma. You say, okay, yes to this one, and you realize that you open a door for somebody to say, that's not fair to me. I didn't sell my property. I didn't make that profit off of it. How come they get to do it?
The reimbursement rule is new.
I think within the last year or so.
Okay, so that didn't apply back in 2016.
Right.
Okay.
And in the past.
But, excuse me,
Sorry.
but the rule that you couldn't obtain a grant in the 5-year period, is it? That's an old rule?
That's the new rule. The old rule was 2 years.
2 years.
Oh, the old rule was 2 years.
Right.
And the reason why it was changed to 5 is because somebody was coming in every 2 years and applying. And so the idea was to try to limit, one individual from doing his building improvements every 2 years and taking advantage.
Or maintenance,
Right.
a roof,
Right.
So in this particular case, they would not, being there was a sale, the previous owner was not required then to make a reimbursement.
Correct.
But under the new rules, they really don't qualify because there was a grant
Correct.
within the last 5 years.
Correct.
And this may happen again with other pieces of property, because I know of one that sold, that got a grant at the same time as this building, has sold since, and that person that owns it is talking about redoing it too, and has mentioned getting a grant for it. So this
Right.
may, again, happen within the next 6 months even.
Right, and the way the Hambrick Commercial Properties actually discussed this, they said this project at this time is just going to be the windows. They said the front door and a few other things would be probably requested next spring. Again, the reason why I bring it up is that you have to understand at what point in time do you create a rule and actually follow through with it.
Well, they wouldn't be eligible then next spring, right?
They can, you have up to a year to complete everything in the project. So if they waited and did the door next spring, then it would still fall under this grant.
Oh, the same grant, the same amount?
Yes.
But the
Okay.
windows are enough to get the full 10,000 anyway, so if they do the windows and don't do the door, they would still get the 10,000, because the windows are like 23,000.
Right.
And then the other dilemma we have, we do want the buildings improved,
Right.
with new buyers, with new ideas, new businesses in them.
And they're doing a lot more to this building than just the windows and doors. I believe
They've added a big glass door on the side
and
and
they're taking down the fence in the parking lot next door and redoing the parking lot, and then they're doing something upstairs to the actual back of the building or something.
yeah, roof deck or something.
Right.
So,
So you were saying it was 2 years since they got the grant, or 2.5 years since they got the grant, or since the property?
The previous owner got it about 2.5 years ago.
June of
Oh,
2016.
Okay.
but
It
the
was-
rule is the parcel.
Right.
Yes, and
In
that,
5
that's,
years.
I agree with you. I think it would, I liked if we set a rule, I prefer to follow the rule. If we want to change that rule, then let's discuss and we'll change that rule. I'd much rather do that than make an exception. However, I did like what you said, and maybe this is something, if we talk about the rule, maybe that's something that could be applied, that is the prorating of, okay, well, if the property is sold and you get another grant within 3 years, well, then you can only get a maximum of the, 40% of the
10,000.
10,000, or whatever percentage it would be, kind of the prorate, same system as before. And that would work against if we got the money back from like you were talking, if we got the person that sold the property, if we get that money now under the new rules, if we get that money, then we could apply that then towards the new grant, which would work out perfect.
Correct.
I guess I think I kind of feel I'm of the mindset, if we set a rule, let's follow it until we change the rule. And in this case, I'm all for changing the rule and doing something such that new owners can continue to improve property, because that's what we want. But I'm afraid if we do that, if we make exceptions in this case, I think we're opening Pandora's box to lots of, and like you said, perfect example, I didn't sell my property. How is that fair to me that they get more money for that piece of property than I got for mine? And I think I would feel that way, and I imagine a lot of other business owners would feel the same way too.
I agree with Nate on that in its entirety. In fact, if you think about it, it may not be fair to individuals in the future, but also what about people who might have passed on it because of that? How do you compensate them? So to stay with the rule until you change the rule is better than an exception, in my opinion. So.
Okay, and the reason why I bring that up is that replacing the front door then next spring, if we change the rule, so that could be one that he could necessarily apply for, and we could approve if we make a rule change between now and next spring. He could still do his exterior windows on the second floor. There was a question because some of the windows are on the side that face west, that those aren't necessarily, seen. Does that make it look better? Do those actually count as being part of the facade? So you have that question, how do you decide that for sure? And I say that because the Business Commission are the ones who ask that question, okay? So, but again, because he talked about replacing the front door actually next spring, if we were to turn this down, he could come back and then request that. Plus, there were other things I think that he talked about doing, potentially maybe those front windows, I'm not sure. but he did mention other things. So if you think about it, if we were to turn this down, he still has the opportunity to come back if we change the rule and make that decision.
What would that rule change be? I'm a little confused.
One of the things they suggested is if there had been a change in ownership, that the 5 years wouldn't apply.
If there had been a change of ownership,
Right.
the 5 years wouldn't apply.
One of the things they discussed at the
But we
meeting.
would still have the 5-year reimbursement, so
Right.
that previous owner, okay.
I like the kind of the prorating of it, because if say a owner has a piece of property and he gets $10,000 for it and sells it in 2 years, then he'd have to pay back 3 years of the amount. Well, then when the new owner comes, they get the prorated amount, which is say if a new owner comes in and he wants to do it in 4 years. Well, that's 2 years and 2 years. The 2 years first that went to the old owner. The second 2 years would come out of the monies that we got back from them. So we wouldn't be, if I'm doing my math right, we wouldn't be out. It's basically $10,000 for every 5 years, and so you could almost apply it $2,000 per year, depending on who if it's this owner or that owner, and it depends on how long it's been between it would have to be a sale, but how many years since the last grant, and then it's prorated, so we're not giving additional money towards the property. It's the same amount of money towards the property if it would weigh the whole 5 years. It just gets prorated and comes out of one person's and goes to another.
One thing that I would say, Trustee Parrott, is that you're asking us to keep track of an awful lot of detail that I would tend to say if we change the rule, that if a new owner comes in, that we can grant them up to the $10,000 amount with the idea that we know we're going to get a prorated share back. It may be 1 year or 4 years worth, but the new owner can ask for up to $10,000. Then the onus is on us to make sure that when the property is sold, that the mortgage is paid off to us as well, and we get that money, and then we could still, though, give $10,000, and we don't have to keep track. When was it sold? Who bought it? Those types of things. I would just say wipe the slate clean and go with the 10, but we have the responsibility, though, of getting back whatever we can under the depreciation schedule or the rebate schedule. That'd be my suggestion, rather than
That sounds good.
put another detail for.
That sounds easier for me to keep track of.
Right. I mean, but I also wonder, is there a way, I'm not sure how to do it, because I don't know exactly what we have for a system, but I would think that we have to have some way of knowing this information and keeping track of it. I don't know if it's off of our GIS system or what, so that we can look that information up about a parcel number, because we're concerned about the parcel and not the property owner. And we should be able to, when somebody comes in and wants to take out a building permit or something, and we give them one of these, before they leave, we should also tell them, okay, just to let you know, 3 years ago this was done, this is the way it works now, and I don't think that they have to worry about, do they get 60% or 40%? I think they should be allowed to go up for the 10. We get back what we should, do our job, okay? But don't put any more onus on Brad or Julie to keep track of all that itty-bitty information.
That makes sense.
But on this one, are you saying to take 6,000 off and give them 4?
Well, I'm gonna go back to what Nate and Rod said, and I guess I'm thinking they would rather vote this one down and vote the next one up in spring for the door and whatever else they want to do. Change our rule between now and then, vote this one down, change our rule. I'll work with Pat to codify that as well as the other things, and then come back. Tell them, though, that hold off doing the door until spring, because that's what he talked about doing. Didn't think he could get it done yet, and whatever else, and apply for that with the idea that we can go the full 10.
But in the spring, you're going the full 10, you're not taking
Right.
off for the previous owner's 3
Correct.
years.
Right.
provided it's a $10,000 or $20,000 project.
Correct, correct.
Time won't be.
What would be the reason, I guess, you don't change the rule now, and I guess for the next meeting, or the next couple meetings, and just table the vote?
Well, he can't start his project until we approve it. If he starts that, then it should be denied as well.
No,
So-
I understand that. I'm just asking just to try to
Well, that's why.
be respectful of the time. I'm just saying, is there a reason why you wouldn't? It doesn't sound like there's a change. It sounds like we have an idea of what the change would be, just even by the next meeting.
The manner to implement the change would be a part of the codification of all of the rules of your building improvement grant program. So I guess the question your suggestion presents is, would it be a reasonable target to have that final approval of that at your next meeting?
Correct.
I'm still working on a draft of that. I think we could certainly push for that and target that. If you wanted to table this tonight and the board felt that was the way to go, certainly Mr. Hambrick and his company, if they didn't want to wait, they could proceed and withdraw their request or be denied because they started. But, you know, that would, if you wanted the soonest timetable for approval, you would look at adopting an ordinance which includes this change at your next meeting, and then you could also act at that same time on the request. The only issue is there is a relatively, you know, that's a big ordinance, and in terms of your review and feedback, you've already given a lot of feedback tonight on one potential change. It may be a type of ordinance where we do a first draft, and in other instances, if we weren't worried about time constraints, we do a first draft and you guys give feedback on any other changes you'd like to see. And so we may be boxing ourselves in a little bit from a time standpoint to do it that way, but that's up to you guys.
I think the idea of a proration, I mean, makes a lot of sense. And if I haven't talked to the property owner, but I mean, it makes sense where they would probably want to do as much as they can now, just because time is usually of the essence. So if that's the case, then, I mean, if it's possible, I'd say, personally, I would say it might be an idea to table it.
I don't think we're talking about doing any proration. We already have the rule that requires the reimbursement on a prorated basis.
Right.
So we don't need to do anything there. I guess as a point of clarification, how old is that rule? When was that rule put in effect?
I don't know off the top of my head, within the last 2 years anyway.
And we don't have this document yet.
It's not, the grant application itself is not actually codified in the municipal code. That's one thing Steve discussed doing.
Yeah, I understand. Last meeting, I think that was.
Yeah, there's on page 7 of the application, item number 17 is repayment of grant funds received, and it shows the reimbursement.
But we have some grants that we've made
Correct.
that would be applicable to, but we don't have any
Mortgage recorded on it.
mortgage
Right.
performance document. I think. So we've got a hole right now.
Right, we need to get those.
So do we
up
go
to
back
date.
to these people we made grants to and?
They signed the
clean that up?
application knowing that. It's part of the application signature portion, that they acknowledge that they would have to pay back a portion if they sell it within 5 years. So I believe we could still go.
So you
ahead and
plan on
record
going
those.
back to this previous owner
No,
on this
No.
property?
No.
No, it wasn't
Other
in-
grantees.
right.
What if I agree with Julie's read on the process when we implement this. It was clearly stated in the application documents. To the extent we have any issues with the property owner, we can record a notice on our own that says based on the terms of grant they accepted, they have an obligation to pay it back. So we have an alternative route if they refuse to cooperate. But
But we need to clean this up.
Yes.
yeah, and that's what I mentioned a moment ago. We just kind of as it is a new process, making sure there's mutual understanding on what I'm doing, what staff's doing, and who's responsible for what. I think that's the discussion I brought up that we need to sync up a little bit better there, which we'll get synced up on here next day or two.
I understand what you're saying, Trustee Lehman, but I guess you can vote however you want, and everybody else can vote how they want on the motion, because the motion's made if you want to ask for a vote on it, Your Honor.
I have two questions.
Mhm.
Does the windows not facing the front qualify for this grant?
It has to be
Not
visible from
familiar.
the street. So it just depends on how you interpret visible from the street, since it's a second story with one-story buildings around it. You can see it if you're standing down the street, you know, it's one of
So-
those.
So the commission agreed to it,
Right.
to the side. Okay, and then have we approached the previous owners on the repayment of,
They weren't required to.
It wasn't in the application at that
it,
time.
oh, it was not at that time, okay.
I'm just trying to see if there's a negative to tabling it. I'm just, by all means, I would like to hear that side.
Well, I guess from my perspective, the ordinance, I think, is going to take an inordinate amount of time. Did I get that right?
You did.
And I would prefer that the village attorney give it, its full attention without rushing it. And I don't know that we have to rush this one or hold it up, because they do have an opportunity to come back for the front door. And I remember he said, I don't remember specifically, but he mentioned other things that they were going to do. Because I remember somebody asked him about the front windows, and he made the comment that they're trying to make the windows look more, did he use the word commercial? Because they have, I'm going to guess, windows that they bought at a lumberyard somewhere, because they had to fill in around them because they didn't fit the holes exactly. And so they're having those windows replaced. Well, if you look at the downstairs, the first floor windows, they won't match the second floor because of that. Because the new ones will have aluminum trim around them that have, I don't know if it was a gray color or whatever, and the windows on the first level are painted white, the trim's white. So he mentioned something, but he didn't specifically say that. But he did mention at the time that probably we'd end up doing the door actually next spring. It would fit within this application, but if he holds off and does it, and we should tell him, you said you were going to hold off and do it, and come back and ask for, a grant then. Because he can't come back in the spring and ask for a second one, right?
You could always hold off the entire project until spring.
Right.
Potentially good.
I don't know what his time would take.
So what you're really saying, the rules are the rules right now. Change the ordinance, come back and get one.
Correct, and I think it's easier for us in the situation where somebody comes and says, well, you granted them this, and now you've changed the ordinance, but you can't grant me a change. And I guess the question is can we make sure we have allowed for all those items we have to worry about when somebody else comes in and asks for the same thing?
Other point, just for clarification, if you were to deny the request tonight, if the ordinance comes together in a way to where, there's nothing that prohibits him from reapplying immediately when we adopt the new ordinance. So if, it happened to be that we're ready to do that at your next meeting, he could apply and promptly have consideration of that request as well.
The only problem though is he has to go before the business district again, the commission. So it wouldn't be till really December before he'd know. If we actually did that here though, he wouldn't have to wait.
I think I've heard that before.
Let me see. Would that be a good idea?
Good idea.
Do we have all the answers? Are we ready to vote? Any other questions? Call the roll.
Lehman.
Yes.
Mennel.
No.
Newman.
No.
Parrot.
No.
Blunier.
No.
Leach.
No.
Motion does not pass.
All right, do you have anything else, trustee?
Nope.
Village administrator, anything else?
I'm going to remind the citizens that the yard waste disposal program will begin this Saturday, run through December 8th, on Sunday, December 8th. And it will be closed Thursday, November 28th, and Friday, November 29th for Thanksgiving. Same rules as usual.
Just,
Thank you.
are they going to check IDs again? Okay.
Yeah. Chief of Police.
I have two things tonight, Your Honor. Only one's on the agenda. That one is information for the board regarding Pumpkin Festival expenses from this year's Pumpkin Festival. One thing that I added to the information that I gave you was security reimbursement that we get from the American Legion. We supply 3 officers. Excuse me. We supply 3 officers there on Friday and Saturday evenings. We get there at about 8 o'clock and leave approximately 1. In the past, years ago, they paid our officers on their own. We had discovered some issues regarding that, work comp issues, etc. We actually discovered that through providing security with the school district. We changed our contract with the school district to cover that, and hence we also changed how we do that with the Legion as well. So what we do is we pay the Legion, we pay the officers out of our general fund on their payroll, and then we invoice the Legion for the amount that it costs for those officers. So the additional leftover was just over $9,700 that it cost us in expenses for the festival. Now we will be submitting for reimbursement through the hotel motel tax after the 1st of January on this one. We do all our special events at once. In addition to this amount here, we will also be adding the deputy chiefs and mine wages during that time. To calculate that, I just merely put 40 hours a week for each of us, and then subtract from the actual amount of time that we were actually there, which equates just over 75 additional hours. So it's about just under $4,000 that we'll be adding to this for reimbursement. So are there any questions I can answer for the board, or do they have anything?
So you're not wanting this approved tonight, you're gonna bring all that back?
It's not really for approval. This is what we spent, and this is information to the board of what that cost was to the village. With no questions, I would go on to my next.
Anyone have any
item.
questions? Okay.
The next item is, at the last meeting, I reminded the board that on this Saturday, the 26th, between 10 and 2, we will be doing our drug take back. With that, we collect solids. We do liquids in their original container. One thing that we do not do is any IV thing, any syringes. Now, the IV stuff are not accepted by the fire department, but they do collect syringes and needles.
Yes, we could take needles and syringes. They just cannot have medication in them.
So, but one thing that the DEA is doing this time to address some of the growing concerns with the health factors with the vaping, they have worked with the EPA, and they have discovered that the vaping, the vapes or the e-cigarettes, if they do not contain batteries in them, they fall under the same waste stream designation as the pharmaceuticals. So in addition to the pharmaceuticals, we will be accepting any vapes or e-cigarettes that do not hold batteries. So they would fall under a different waste stream designation, as well as they are a potential fire hazard. So you would need to check with any electronic company or a battery, like Interstate Batteries, that whether or not they would accept that. So
And that's at the police station?
that is at the police station in our lobby, and again, that's from 10 to 2 this Saturday.
Anything else?
That's it tonight, Your Honor.
All right. Corporation Counsel.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Director of Fire and Emergency Services.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
And Zoning Code Enforcement Officer.
We've got 3 items tonight, Your Honor. I was forwarded 3 cases that Tazewell County Zoning Board of Appeals will make rulings on November 5th. They're included in your packet. One is for a landscape business or personal residence. The other 2 is basically an accessory structure to be built before the primary dwelling. In both of these, those two cases are together, a special use and the variance. In both of these cases, they're so far removed from the village of Morton, I don't see where it's an issue for us. But they want any kind of feedback or comments, if we have any, from the board, I'd be more than happy to pass that along.
Anybody got any comments or questions on that? Okay. Anything else? That's it.
Nothing else.
All right, village
Yep.
trustees, any of you have anything tonight? Well, then there's no need for closed session, so if we could have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.